Ho ho!
Tomorrow at Camp Nou, Barcelona versus Real Madrid. What kind of match, what kind of Clásico are you expecting?
Well, I hope it's a great match against a great rival that is performing at a very high level in the league. At home, they've won every match and they're playing great football. We're really eager to play what is surely the game that attracts the most attention in the world. And we go into it with the ambition to do things well and to win the match.
I don't know how you can explain what has happened in recent days inside the dressing room, how you handled it, and whether it's very difficult to prepare such an important match in this atmosphere.
Look, there are two things I have to say. First, I'm very proud of the firmness, speed, and transparency with which the club acted. And second, the players have already expressed their regret, acknowledged their mistake, accepted the consequences of what they did, and apologized to the fans, the club, the dressing room, and to me. For me, that's enough. What I'm not going to do is throw my players onto a public bonfire because neither of them deserves that. Neither Fede Valverde nor Aurélien Tchouaméni, considering what they've done for this club over so many years. And I say this both as a fan and from these 4 months working with them, from everything they've shown me day after day, what it means to be a Real Madrid player, their commitment, their effort, their love for this shirt. I'm not going to forget that. I always give one example, and I speak about him often with his son Roberto, so he knows I speak about him with affection and admiration. For me, there is one player who represents and embodies what a Real Madrid player should be, Juanito.
And Juanito never made mistakes?
I think Madridistas are incredibly proud of him. He's the only player we sing about every single match, every single game, because he understood what Real Madrid is. Not only was he an extraordinarily talented player, but he always defended this badge and gave his soul for it every match. So how could I not make mistakes myself? And I would never put myself at his level. But if we love him so much, it's because we felt he was one of us. Someone who also made mistakes, just like anyone can make mistakes. I believe Fede Valverde and Aurélien Tchouaméni are two players who represent Real Madrid very well, and they deserve for us to move on, to give them an opportunity to continue fighting for this club. They are two players who are European champions with Real Madrid. Not every player who has come through this club can say that, and I'm very proud of them. Very, very proud of them. I'm also not going to allow this situation to be used to question my players' professionalism, because a lot of lies are being told, many lies. It's a lie that my players are not professional. It's a lie that my players have ever disrespected me, even once. It's completely false, just as it's false that some players don't play because they have problems with me or because their personal lives don't match what a Real Madrid player's life should be. And I'm not going to allow that because it's completely false. I, together with my players, am the first person responsible for the fact that this season has not lived up, certainly not, to what our fans expect from us on a sporting level. But I've been here for 4 months, and I'm very proud of my players. And above all, very grateful for the way they welcomed me in a situation that was not easy at all considering where we were coming from, because the demands at this club are enormous. And of course, sometimes frustration and anger can lead to situations we don't want. But we have to use that frustration and anger to play a great match tomorrow. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to focus on and where we have to put all our energy.
You've just made a very thoughtful reflection. I wanted to ask you personally whether you feel responsible in any way for what has happened this past week, and whether you think you could have done something to avoid the outcome involving those two players.
That's perfectly fine. I'm responsible for everything that happens at Real Madrid, and if you want someone to blame, here I am.
You say you won't allow lies to spread day to day, but the reality is there was a problem on 2 consecutive days between 2 players who are very important for the club. I don't know whether you've ever seen a situation like this during your time as a coach or as a player in the first team, and whether you really think everything that's come out has been exaggerated enough to justify 2 players fighting over 2 straight days.
Look, I once had a teammate who grabbed a golf club and hit another teammate with it. For me, the most serious thing and what hurts me the most, and I've told my players this, is that, as I said last week, what happens in the Real Madrid dressing room should stay in the Real Madrid dressing room. That's what hurts me the most. Situations that obviously do not represent Real Madrid, just as they don't represent any club when they happen, because these are situations that should never happen between teammates, have always happened everywhere. And I'm not justifying it at all by saying that, but yes, I've experienced situations that were even worse. And what happened yesterday was also an incident where we were simply very unfortunate that it ended with Fede getting a cut. It had more to do with bad luck than with what actually happened, nothing more. As I said, I think this is a matter we have to close. The club handled it very well yesterday. The players, I repeat, have accepted the consequences, apologized, and are now ready to defend the Real Madrid shirt. In Fede's case, he'll have to wait a few days, and after that we'll focus only on tomorrow's match.
One of the phrases we've heard most these days, and even before this, is that in the Real Madrid dressing room, the players have too much power, that their wishes and demands carry too much weight. I'd like to know what you think about that.
I'm not really sure what that refers to. I'll repeat what I said 2 minutes ago. When a Real Madrid player doesn't play, it's purely a sporting decision. And as I always say, maybe at other clubs 22 players can play. I can only put 11 on the pitch. And when I choose 11, and I've said this in I don't know how many press conferences now, it's not because I have to be unhappy with the ones who don't play, but because I choose the players I believe deserve it or are best suited for that match. But again, many lies have been told about players not playing because they've had problems with me, or because I'm unhappy with their professionalism, or 1,000 other stories that are not just untrue, they are outright lies. Absolute lies. And from here, what matters most to me is what our fans think. Honestly, they can be calm about this dressing room and these players. The only thing they should demand from us is that Real Madrid must return to winning. We know that spending 2 years at this club without winning is not easy. We've also gone through difficult periods in our history. Maybe younger fans don't remember them. 30 years without winning a European Cup. 12 years between La Novena and La Décima. I arrived here when the club had gone 5 years without reaching the quarterfinals, and we still spent another year failing to do so. We've gone through valleys before, of course we have, but we have to come through this together, the fans and the club. There is nobody more prepared than our president to turn this situation around. I remember very well what the club was like before his arrival and everything he has achieved. He is surely the president with the most titles in the club's history and the one who restored Real Madrid to where it belongs. And together we have to fight to bring Real Madrid back to where it deserves to be.
I want to ask you about two situations. You mentioned Juanito and spontaneous regret. Juanito stepped on Matthias's head, and before he had even showered, with his hair still wet, he came out at the Olympico to apologize. It had only been 10 minutes, and he already knew his football career was over.
Well, look, my office isn't inside the Real Madrid dressing room. I wish it were, because then I could be responsible for everything that happens and control absolutely everything. Again, if the conclusion here and the consequences or interpretation of this situation is that the coach should have stopped all of this, then I repeat, I accept it. I accept it. It's an unpleasant situation, and the players know they made a mistake. I think it should serve as an example for everyone, and that's all. I believe we should move on from what happened, learn from it, continue on Real Madrid's path, and not forget that tomorrow there's a Barcelona versus Real Madrid match.
You've defended the players and also defended the dressing room. I'd like to ask you, how do you see the dressing room? Throughout your career, both as a player and now as a coach, how would you describe this dressing room? Is it a healthy dressing room? Is it a dressing room worthy of Real Madrid?
Absolutely, absolutely. I repeat, it's not easy to deal with 2 trophyless seasons. It's not easy to deal with everything that has happened. And when you have players in this dressing room, and I always say that to be a Real Madrid player, you must have great ambition, be extremely demanding of yourself, always want to win. Every player has a lot at stake. Their prestige, defending this badge, living up to this crest. So of course, it's not an easy situation for any of us to handle, knowing we have to live up to expectations and that we surely need to do things better, change, improve, reflect, and start over in order to become stronger. But I see a healthy dressing room. I truly do. I see a dressing room ready to win again. And surely next year, everyone will have much more experience. Objectively, this is a younger dressing room than the one I was part of during my 7 years at Real Madrid, and all these experiences will help them grow. I'm convinced that next season they'll come back with more energy, more strength, more experience, and a much better understanding of what this badge means. And I repeat, Nothing in these 4 months has made me feel anything other than happy and proud of this dressing room.
I wanted to ask you about everything that's happening with Kylian Mbappé. We asked you the other day in Barcelona after he arrived in Madrid just minutes before the match started. Now people are even judging whether he leaves Valdebebas smiling or not after training sessions. You said his free time, his rest, are handled by the doctors. I wanted to ask whether you think it's necessary for him to ask your permission to travel, whether he did or not, and whether in that case you feel undermined in your authority, and also whether he will finally be available for tomorrow's Clásico or not.
That's a lot of questions, isn't it? Look, trying to take out of context the fact that a player leaves training smiling is once again trying to take advantage of a situation to twist things out of proportion. Just like when Carreras was shown on the pitch against Espanyol right after a teammate got injured and another player was about to come on. I can only speak positively about Álvaro Carreras, his professionalism, the way he has always treated me and all his teammates, and how well he's working. I think he's a very young player with a great future. When he has played, it's because he deserved it. When he hasn't played, it's because another teammate deserved it more. As for Kylian Mbappé, I think all Madridistas know the effort he made to come to Real Madrid. He had absolutely everything at his previous club, and he had to give up many things to come to the club of his dreams. We've all seen Kylian Mbappé as a child wearing that Real Madrid tracksuit, and as I said before and last week as well, I feel I have complete authority. What I do is control what my players do on the training ground and on the football pitch. In that sense, I feel fully invested with the authority of a Real Madrid coach. And Real Madrid players, like any players in the world, must feel that the coach has authority regardless of his name or the length of their contracts, because ultimately they are respecting the Real Madrid coach, in this case, their current coach, and I believe that as a player, that is the most important thing.
You're strongly defending all the players, whether they play more or less, despite everything that has happened. I wanted to ask whether you think it's unfair for those kinds of things to be leaked, especially toward you and the club.
All right. I'll repeat it again. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. The fact that things happening inside the dressing room are being leaked seems to me like a betrayal of Real Madrid, an absolute act of disloyalty toward this badge, and it's something that saddens me greatly.
I wanted to ask whether you still think, as you once told us, that Mourinho is one of us.
Yes.
The other day when I asked you about Ceballos, you told me that what happens in the dressing room stays in the dressing room, that it was something you had learned. Now you've just given a very forceful answer calling it a betrayal. What I want to ask is, when there are leaks, have you identified where they come from? Do you know where the leaks are?
No, I don't work for the CIA or anything like that, and inside the Real Madrid dressing room, I'm not accusing the players or anyone else because I can't do that. There are many people around the Real Madrid first team, and I'm not here to point fingers at anyone. And as I've told you before, I try to lead by example, and what happens in my private conversations with the players will always stay between them and me. I believe that's the proper way to act, the way this dressing room should function, and the example I should set for my players and for the whole club.
I wanted to know what might have been missing from Arbeloa, because obviously this is something you yourself said you would have stopped if you could have. But do you feel something may have been lacking in the manager's leadership to avoid these situations? Or how could things have reached this point?
No, look, the only thing that worries me, the thing I reflect on, is how I could have made my team win more matches. I think there have been moments of enormous difficulty during these 4 months. I know the situation I found when I arrived. I know what we've gone through. We won very difficult matches. We beat City despite having many absences, a team with a fantastic squad and a fantastic coach who, after beating us, went on to beat Arsenal 2-0 in a cup match, who are now Champions League finalists, who beat Chelsea 3-0 away and Liverpool 4-0. And we beat them in both matches. We also beat Benfica twice, a team that hasn't lost a single league match. We beat a great Atlético de Madrid. We've played some great games. The players have made a tremendous effort. Maybe I feel that on the Bayern day, there were things that, as happens in football, escaped our control. And I asked myself a lot what I could have done better to win the league matches that slipped away from us, sometimes under circumstances that were also difficult to accept. But as far as I'm concerned, that's what worries me most and what I reflect on most. how to make my players better, how to make my team better, and how I could have helped them more to win despite the circumstances, the difficulties, and everything I've had to deal with.
Yesterday, Real Madrid made it very clear in their statement that both players would receive financial fines. I wanted to ask whether you can rule out any sporting punishment on your side. Valverde obviously cannot play, but in Tchouaméni's case, and whether it would be normal for Tchouaméni to be part of tomorrow's Clásico.
Tomorrow, Tchouaméni will be included in the squad.
This season, you've spoken a lot about how much players run. You've also said it bothers you, or that you felt the team had to run more than opponents. My question is, does what happens in the dressing room have any relation to what happens on the pitch?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. I think, as I've said before, I don't even know how many press conferences we've done already. Quite a few, right? Yes, quite a few. People have criticized me a lot for not talking about tactical concepts, football ideas, or more technical aspects, and instead, ever since I arrived, I've emphasized the values I wanted to see from my team. And well, it seems what I said last week attracted a lot of attention, but I think it's what I've always been saying. We can do things better or worse on the pitch, and we'll have to work on that. But there is something that represents Real Madrid, and that, for me, should always define a team. Effort, teamwork, solidarity, ambition, passion, and we have to show that at all times. There is no excuse for us, as a team, not to demonstrate those things every day. Then, tactically and football-wise, of course there are many things we must work on and improve. But for me, those values can never be missing from a team, especially not from a Real Madrid team.
Throughout this club's century-long history, 124 years, the captain has always been chosen at Real Madrid according to seniority, according to years spent at the club. Do you think this is still the best model for appointing a captain, at least at Real Madrid, where you spent so many years? Or do you think there could be a better model, like a dressing room vote among players, which some other clubs use? How do you see the issue of captaincy? And do you think what happened with Valverde could affect his captain's armband?
I'm very, very, very happy with the work and leadership of my 4 captains.
You said earlier that you see this dressing room prepared to win again next year, with more experience and having learned from this. Is that something you also apply to yourself going into next season, learning from these 4 months in order to win again here at Real Madrid next year?
What I apply to myself is wanting to win tomorrow's match. That's the future occupying my mind right now, and where all my energy is focused. Well, thank you.